Hi guys, what's up? My name is David and welcome back to my channel. So today I want to talk about something that I've actually changed my view on quite drastically in recent times, I guess, and it is the importance of historical accuracy within contemporary Norse paganism. Now, before I get into everything, I just want to say I study Scandinavian studies. I have done comparative research on pre-Christian religions of Europe, and I've also looked at folkloristics and how new traditions are constructed within modern paganism. And I also go to pagan festivals and stuff like that myself. So I have both professional and personal experience with this stuff. And although I will be mostly talking about Norse paganism because that is my area of interest and expertise, most of the things I'm going to say are relevant for other forms of modern paganism or heathenry or whatever you like to call it. So let's get into it, shall we? There exists many different opinions on how modern paganism should look like. And what even is modern paganism, right? So paganism itself is a word first used by Romans, specifically early Christian Romans, to speak about anyone who was not Christian. And this term was used in a derogatory way, although in modern times people have reclaimed the label and use it as a term to describe themselves if they consider themselves practitioners or believers of any pagan religion. And there are many other terms that can be used, such as in the case of Norse paganism, things like Ausatru, which means believe in the Old Norse pantheon, basically. And yeah, there's not like one exact definition of what paganism is in the 21st century, and also it is different for everyone. So I'm not going to put too much time into explaining what paganism exactly is, but one thing about modern paganism is that it is obviously inspired by older pre-Christian religions. But how much can we really know about these religions, right? So when it comes to religions like classical Greek or Roman, there are tons of mythological texts written almost contemporarily to the times that these beliefs actually existed. And they can tell us a lot about what people actually believed, or at least what the people who wrote those texts down wanted others to think that people believed. But when it comes to things like Old Norse beliefs in pre-Christian Scandinavia of the early medieval period slash late Iron Age, what we would call the Viking Age now, but also before that, most of the sources we have come from Christian writers, except for a few that come from Arabic writers, but still not from actual practitioners and believers of the religion themselves. So every written source we have on that system of beliefs comes from someone who is clearly biased, clearly writing about these beliefs for a reason, clearly writing about these beliefs with the intention of replacing them with Christianity, and also writing about these beliefs in a way that would probably put them in a negative light to show Christian readers of the source material that, Christianity is better than those beliefs, that those beliefs are more primitive, less developed, and Christianity is the way to go. And the situation is slightly different when it comes to Arabic sources because they do not come from people with the intention of converting the people they wrote about. For example, for Scandinavian slash Viking Age beliefs, the most important one is Ibn Fadlan, who wrote about burial rituals and other religious customs in the Rus, which is present day Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. Ooh. And when people from Scandinavia, the Rus most likely being from Sweden, this term has been linked to the Swedish Roslagen, which is a region in Sweden and is also found in the Finnish word for Sweden, which is Ruotsi. So yeah, these people were Scandinavians and they were doing their thing, and they were described by an Arabic traveler who perhaps did not have the same intentions as the Christian ones, but was obviously still biased. But anyways, my point is that any sources we have available to us today, which people want to use in order to believe in these old Norse gods or whatever, it's still only fragmentary and it's biased from a Christian or a Muslim viewpoint. So how historically accurate can that be? And how historically accurate do we want it to be? So I have to admit, like when I first got into this whole scene, I wanted to do everything as correct as possible. But then the more I read on Old Norse mythology and Viking Age archaeology, history in general, I realized that there is a lot of things that we just don't know and we probably will never know. And I know that it's sometimes that is difficult to acknowledge because it's just something that you'll just never get. Like you can try to know as much as you possibly can about these people from this time period, from this religion, but you'll never know everything. You cannot travel in time and ask them. And even if you would be able to, you probably wouldn't exactly understand their answers from a 21st century post Christian viewpoint. So that is actually also something I want to talk about. So even if we were to do paganism exactly as it was done before Christianity, we all, at least in the Western world, have some sort of Christian background as white people. I mean, of course, not everyone, but I'm guessing that a lot of people who are interested in Norse paganism have either some sort of Scandinavian ancestry or live in Scandinavia. And even if you weren't raised religiously Christian, a lot of things around us come from a time period where Christianity was the thing, the norm. Like our calendar, for example, the fact that we live in 2024 after the birth of Christ. You know, Christianity is in every single aspect of society, whether we like it or not. And the only thing we can do is acknowledge that and keep living with that, I guess. And I made a video before about my experience with the pagan group Samfundet Fornsiet here in Sweden, and I was curious about and surprised about how their practice was so Christian to me, because they had a priest and everything, and they were reading these like religious texts that were not based on actual texts from the Viking Age, because again, those were Christian, but they were like compiled in a way that a pastor would read in the church. So to me, that was weird. But thinking about it, I'm like, if you really want to practice a religion that we'll never fully understand, we'll never fully know, then the only way you can do this is by using other religions that you have experience with. And I know that a lot of people in this pagan community are very much anti Christian. And although I disagree with a lot of views of Christian people, I don't think every Christian is bad. And I do think Christianity has its nice sides. I mean, I used to go to church when I was younger, and I never had any negative experience with the people there. The only negative experience I've had is with Christians online commenting on my videos. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with being Christian. You don't need to be like hating against Christianity in order to be a real pagan. You can acknowledge your own religious context that you live in and still actively choose to do something else, like paganism. But let's get into the specifics. What exactly are our sources for any trace of Old Norse religion? Well, I think the most known ones, the ones that people usually have read if they want to like do anything Viking Age and Old Norse related, are the Eddas, the Prose and the Poetic Edda. And these compilations of mythological and heroic poems slash stories are all written in medieval Iceland after the Viking Age and after the introduction of Christianity. And this is one thing you should remember too, is that Christianity was introduced during the Viking Age. Not all Vikings were pagans. A lot of them were Christians. Now, runestones, most of them were Christian. And that is something that people don't realize. Like, the Vikings were not necessarily these pagan barbarians. Some of the Scandinavians living during the Viking Age were Christian. And they were not always brutally converted. They sometimes just decided that that would be best for them. Anyways, so these two sources, the Prose Edda and the Poetic Edda, they have some overlap, but there's also some differences between them. And that is the main source of stories about the gods. And I know that not everyone who considers themselves a Norse pagan like actually actively believes in these gods in the same way that, for example, Christians believe in their God. Like, it's more like they are a representation of human values, of natural phenomena. Like, You don't need to like exactly believe in a specific god, just believe in what this god represents. I know that is vague, but I hope you understand what I mean. So these sources we have, again, are Christian, are biased. The people who wrote this down most likely had knowledge of the Bible, obviously, but also probably of classical mythology, which might have inspired these like stereotypical views of the Norse gods and the Interpretatio Romana, which means that the gods are being compared to the closest Roman god. So how accurate those descriptions exactly are and whether they're like based on other mythologies and other religions' worldviews, you would have to like know the exact historical and literary context that the people who wrote these sources have lived in, which is exactly what I'm studying because I want to know. But I know that not everyone has the need and the possibility to do that. But then when it comes to sources for actual religious practice, because that is two different things, right? Belief and practice. Like you can believe in stuff, but you also want to do something. For me, paganism is also going somewhere, meeting with like-minded people, doing rituals and stuff. Then, for example, we can look at Adam of Bremen, who was a German bishop, and he wrote about the cult at Uppsala, which is a central cult place in Sweden. It was a central cult place before the introduction of Christianity, and even now there is pagan activity going on again. So Adam of Bremen describes what was going on there and how the gods were celebrated, how offerings were done, how these cult activities look like. And again, it's not entirely sure because he was a Christian, like how much of that was just propaganda or how much of that was inspired by things he knew and things he knew his readers would understand. For example, he uses the word templum, which means temple. Yeah, by the way, these texts are all written in Latin. And it is not sure whether he just uses the word temple because people would understand what a temple is, or if these pagan people actually had something that would be considered a temple. And when we look at these historical accounts, we can always use archaeological research to compare them. Like, okay, this person wrote this. Can we find anything that confirms that? And obviously, Uppsala exists. Old Uppsala, the King's Mount, they seem to be a valuable place of cult. But the things that were found at Uppsala do not exactly correspond with the things that Adam of Bremen wrote about it. So, how accurate is it? And archaeological source material also doesn't always tell you exactly what it is, except for one thing that I mentioned in one of my previous videos. There was this Thor's hammer found once that says, "This is a hammer." So that gives some valuable context. Okay, this pendant is actually a hammer. It is what we think it was. Because it's not that scholarly assumptions are always incorrect. It's just that they are difficult to falsify. Because Viking Age pre-Christian culture is seen as like a semi-historical one. Because, historical means if there is written source material from that time period, from those people. And the Vikings did have a writing system, of course, the runes, but they weren't writing any long-form literature. Like, there is no Viking Bible, Of course, the Edda could be seen as that, but it was not written in runes and it was not written in the Viking Age. So, of course, we have some runic inscriptions that attest some gods. Like, for example, prayers to Thor on runestones, or saying that Thor consecrated, which again, because runestones are originally a Christian monument. The first highly decorated one was the runestone of Harald Bluetooth in Jellinge in Denmark, and he was Christian and his monument was Christian. And it is thought that other runestones, which are mostly found in Sweden, by the way, are inspired by that monument. And yeah, again, most of them were Christian, but some of them are pagan, but they're still made in the same Christian way. Like the ones that mention Thor, say like Thor consecrated. And then consecrated is, of course, a Christian term. But this brings me back to the whole idea of paganism and Christianity and how they correlate to each other, because it doesn't have to be one or the other. Like, syncretism is a thing, and if we want to be historically accurate, then using both pagan elements and Christian elements is exactly historically accurate, because that is what happened. There are finds of molds that can be used to make Thor's hammer pendants or crosses, which means that these craftsmen had an audience of both pagan people and Christian people, and then there is graves found with the jewelry with both crosses and symbols considered pagan. So I think the most historically accurate thing is actually to use elements from both the things we know about the pre-Christian religion and also of Christianity, because that was also a religion that was used and practiced during the Viking Age. Again, I know that there's people who have like completely different views on this than I do, which is fine. I'm not saying that you should believe everything I say and not think for yourself at all. Like, no. I just think that gatekeeping religion is weird. And if you really want to believe in something and you want to do your absolute best to do it as accurately as you can, then that's fine. But if you don't want to do it as accurately as you can and just want to do what feels best for you, like, that is fine too. Who is going to stop you? Again, we will never know exactly how this religion looked like. So why not give it a bit of your own interpretation? Today we have completely different views on religion than existed in early Christianity or in the Viking Age. So of course our ideas of paganism are going to be completely different than pre-Christian paganism. So if you want to take a more individualistic approach to practicing paganism, then you do that. That's great. So I hope I've made my standpoint on historical accuracy in modern paganism clear. I hope you've learned something. If you have anything to say, anything to add, anything to ask, I'm always more than happy to receive comments, feedback, criticism, questions, whatever it is. Just please be nice to me, to your fellow commenters. Let's keep this a civilized place, okay? We're not barbarians anymore. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. This is probably the last time I will be filming in this environment because I'm going home soon. Because by the way, I'm on exchange in Sweden right now and I normally live in the Netherlands. So yeah, by the time this video comes out, I'll already be home for like a week and maybe I'll film another video here. I don't know yet. But I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you'll have a lovely rest of your week, day, month, whatever it is that you're watching this. Okay, bye bye.